Hello everyone and welcome back. Now we are on to our last API vulnerability in OWASP list, and it is all about unsafe consumption of third-party APIs. Now this type of API security vulnerability arises when developers have a tendency to trust data received from third-party APIs more than what the user has provided in the input. Now this can lead to the adoption of weaker security standards. Now in this case, attackers target integrated third-party services rather than trying to compromise the target API directly, and they exploit vulnerabilities in these integrated API endpoints to compromise the overall security of the API, right? Now imagine a scenario as example of SQL injection through enrichment API. Now in this case, an API relies on a third-party service to enrich user-provided business address, right? So a user provides a business address in a text field somewhere in your application and send it to third-party service, which could be another API by our application or API endpoint. Now, attackers use the third-party service to store a SQL injection payload associated with the business created by them, right? So they will create this malicious payload, which they will then try to save in this third-party service and try to modify the response your API is getting from the third-party service, right? Now, when the API pulls data from the third-party service based on user input, the SQL injected payload will get triggered in the third-party in your database when it gets returned by the third party as a malicious response, leading to data exfiltration to the attacker's server. Another scenario could be redirecting. Now, another scenario can be redirect vulnerability in medical information API system, where an API integrates with a third party service provider to store sensitive user medical information. Now imagine you go to a doctor and they save your information, sensitive medical information in their portal, but that portal connects to an API which actually utilizes a third-party service to store that information, right? Now attackers compromise a third-party API and make it respond to a 308 permanent redirect to their server. Since the API blindly follows redirect, there is no validation check at the API or your own application's API side, right? No data sanitation, no validation. It will just send the user sensitive data to that attacker's server, where the 308 permanent redirect will redirect the server, right? One more scenario could be SQL injection through Git repository integration. Now here in this case, an attacker prepares a malicious Git repository with a name containing a SQL injection payload. When an application integrates with the repository, believing the name is safe input, the SQL injection payload is used in a SQL query. As a result, the application becomes vulnerable to SQL injection attacks. Right, these are some of the examples. There could be many such scenarios. But basically, if your API is trusting the data coming in from a third party without putting in place any validation or data sanitization of data coming in from third party and not trusting the user's input, now all these sort of injection can occur when attackers somehow finds a way to inject malicious payload. Now in our sample code, we will look at the about section of our application, where we can subscribe to our application by providing an email address. Now this is left vulnerable. So let's go on to our code and see this unsafe consumption of APIs vulnerability in action.